Welcome and thank you for joining us for another segment of the Jane Irrigation training series. I'm Vice President of Water Management Solutions, Richard Restuccia, and I'm really excited to get an industry update today from the Association of Professionals. And, again, this is that represents a million of us, a million professionals in landscape worldwide. I've really appreciated over the years the good work that NALP has done representing us in various areas. And today we have as our guest Brit, the Chief Executive Officer of NALP, as well as Andrew Bray, who is the Vice President of Government Relations. These guys make a great 1-2 punch for the NALP, and I'm really glad they're representing all of us because I feel like my voice is being heard, and I feel like I've got a couple of great advocates in the industry working for not just me, but all of us. So we're really lucky to have that. Today, they're going to give us an update on a lot of things. So be patient, stay tuned, and really understand that we've got a lot to cover. We're going to talk about COVID. We're going to talk about the impacts the election may have on our industry and a few other surprises as well. So with that, I want to say, Britt, welcome and thank you for coming today.
Well, Richard, thank you so much, and we really appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk to this audience and share a little bit about what we're up to at NALP and hopefully give some people some really valuable insight they can walk away with. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get rolling here. What we're looking to cover today is, as mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about COVID and what we some of the things that we did, but also what we learned, some trends we saw and things we think are going to continue. I'll also include in that an industry update in terms of what we're seeing from a financial impact to the industry. Then I will hand it off to my esteemed colleague, Andrew, who will walk you through the latest and greatest of what's happening in government relations, federally, but also somewhat in the States. He's also going to point out some of the potential bogeys we see coming down the path as we launch into 2021. And he's going to even have a little fun forecasting the election. So I will make this caveat for Andrew now, although I'm sure he'll make it on his own. Predicting elections has not been his strong suit. So you can take it for what it's worth, right, Andrew?
Correct.
Yeah.
But I think he's got some really thoughtful analysis and should give you something to think about, especially the implications of potential outcomes of the election. So let's go ahead and get started. And one of our favorite slides here is obviously the little COVID picture with the world turned upside down. And I really think that's really what happened when COVID came along. And so we had to rethink and rework how we did everything, whether that be if you were in landscape, lawn care, et cetera. And so really the role that NALP needed to play in this, we're covering these 5 points, the industry remaining essential and being considered essential actually, and then remaining essential was really critical. We had to make changes in terms of what we were doing from an operations standpoint in order to keep everybody safe, not only our customers safe, but our workers as well. So the economic impact, and we're going to cover that in detail. Certainly other major industries in the United States. I spent early parts of my career working for retail as well as food service distribution industries, and I can tell you those two industries are really hurting right now. So we feel very fortunate that the industry is at the place where it is, and I'll kind of review that with you exactly what we're hearing from the membership. Workforce continues to be an issue. We thought with high unemployment, we might be able to attract more folks in. Hasn't happened yet, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then finally, what we're planning to do looking beyond COVID. So let's talk a little bit about, being essential. So this is the CISA list that the Department of Homeland Security puts out. This is really where I have to tip my cap to Andrew and his team. Originally, landscape and lawn care were not included on the CISA list. And the CISA list is really listing the industries that are considered essential by the Department of Homeland Security. So after some really good finagling on his team's part, we got the attention of the folks we needed to get attention of, and we were placed on the list. Now, let's be clear, the CISA list is not kind of what we'd hoped it to be, was the all-encompassing list, but not every state followed the CISA list. But being on it certainly gave us an argument because, really when a state said, well, we don't deem you essential, we said, well, the Department of Homeland Security does, and oh, by the way, 38 other states do as well. It gives you a much better argument. So this was a key win for Andrew and his team. And they really did a great job. Again, it was, there's obviously the language is important, and nuances of language are important, but we wanted obviously to be implicitly included. But then the other aspect of this is that when we weren't excluded, we were able to make arguments of why we should be included. And really what it came down to is public safety. And it's a good argument that we have. What we do as an industry helps reduce pests. And it candidly, the other thing that really appealed in this time of COVID was that the benefits that healthy landscapes can have just on a person's blood pressure and their status and well-being. So a lot of these arguments played through, and again, we were very fortunate that it was recognized by the states. And that we were able to get our folks back to work. Now, I'll invite Andrew to come in on this because as I was joking with Richard earlier, Andrew was on the front lines. I was tucked away in my bunker. But as we were looking at some of the states where we had problems, California, New York, California, obviously the first hit, we struggled in localities there because they were not consistent. New York obviously devastatingly hit, and so that was one that we kind of cautiously walked around. And then as you looked at Washington, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan, Andrew, were really the two troublemakers at the end of the day for us. You want to just give a little commentary on those two and kind of how that played out?
Sure. Yeah. So who would have thought, and trust me, we'll be talking about those three states when we do our election update. Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan were the type of states where they didn't come out and name landscaping or professional landscape services by name. We believed that they had by inference in some capacity, maybe not in all functions of everyday landscaping. And in all three states, what happened was, understandably, people started reaching out to the governor's office and saying, hey, are we included? Are we not included? And what this resulted in was an opinion from some staffer within the governor's administration putting out on a website, no, you are not included unless you are, doing something to protect imminent, health or hate, like a falling tree almost sort of thing. So restrictive that it basically was, we're not essential. And so it took a while to have to walk those back. Wisconsin was the first. We got them to walk back pretty quickly. Minnesota took a few more weeks. Michigan, literally, there were lawsuits being filed by members of the landscape industry. NALP was not involved in those, but we were very aware of those. And there was tremendous pressure under Governor Whitmer to open up the economy. And it wasn't just landscape that was struggling there, but those three were really tough. And as we go into this next winter, our eyes are wide open with those states, and we're hopeful that some of the inroads we made in those governors' offices will still carry through the day. But obviously remaining very sensitive in those three states, plus California and the Pacific Northwest, I think will continue to be a little problematic. So we're going to be watching those closely.
Yeah. Just say great job to you guys, because really we were at a time where because of jobs and earnings, everybody was trying to deem their business or their industry as essential. And so, people who were making this judgment were certainly being bombarded with some situations that weren't legit, right? But you guys persevered and did a really good job on it. So yeah, thank you.
Well, and even if you talk about Michigan, and some would question as to why we didn't jump in with both feet on a lawsuit. Well, when you start suing the governor, your ability to talk behind the scenes is extremely limited. So we decided that we were going to continue to play the role of being able to communicate with the governor's office and being neutral on the lawsuit. And candidly, that's how you create the greatest level of pressure. It's not pressure just from one side, but you create pressure from all sides. And so again, I have to tip my hat to Andrew and his team, that we made that strategic decision, keeping attention on the lawsuits, but we're able to help leverage that and getting the solution. And at the end of the day, that's what we hoped for. It's not to win a lawsuit. It's to make sure that our industry was deemed essential, which it is, and we were successful in doing that. So, so as we kind of move forward here, you know, one of the things that we also did was really work hard on creating safety guidance for everyone. And so, again, part of the development here, and really, I think that the more interesting thing is this is kind of the laundry list of the things that we created. A lot of this due to Andrew and his team, but this is a point where I'll brag a little bit about the NALP staff. We had our finance people who were digging through the legislation on PPP loans so that we could better interpret those. This just wasn't a government affairs effort. This was a total team effort. Wherever we could pitch in and get the right answers done, we made sure that we did. And so as a result, you see this laundry list of things that we were able to kind of make available. And the other thing that we made a very clear decision on as we moved into this was we were making this information available to the industry. It wasn't a matter whether you were an NALP member or not. We wanted the entire industry to have access to this. And you know, there are times where we have certain things that we make proprietary to our members and our members only. But this is one of those instances where the entire industry needed a lift. And so all of these resources became available to anyone who needed them and desired them. And you know, one of the things I think you see here when we talk about the numbers, just in those who participated in some of our webinars, I mean, these were very, very large webinars. But the number of non-members that participated too was very gratifying to us because it meant that the industry was really, you know, coming to us and we were able to give them a hand when they needed it. So we were very excited about that. So I wanted to kind of touch on a little bit of the operational changes that we saw throughout this entire process. You know, obviously a lot of things that put into place, you know, as it related to temperature checks, everything else along those lines. I think that the interesting things that we'd like to point out about some changes that have occurred were, first of all, how, you know, the gathering for the stretch in the morning and everything had to go away because you had to have the aspect of being spread out. And so what we found is that our members shifted to this dynamic of, you know, staggered shifts as opposed to a single start time. And many of them are not going to go back. They're going to stay with it because what they found is that it's actually far more efficient to do it that way. So, you know, and I, of course, depends on the type of company, but on the whole, I think we will see a big change in terms of how that works operationally. You know, I think the other thing is that working remotely, you know, Richard, we were having a conversation about working remotely. And, you know, I think our members have also come to realize, especially with their sales teams, the ability to have them in the office is really not as important as they'd once deemed. And so they're finding some real success there. And again, I think that's a change that's going to stick. I think how we work is going to be very different as we move forward. So, so let's talk about this survey that we prefaced earlier. And I didn't put an enormous amount of numbers up on the screen, but I did want to kind of walk you through them. So we kind of break things up and we try to ask overall, how you doing, right? And so really the overall how everybody's doing was that 60% on the whole of the whole group came back and said, we're doing better than planned, which is pretty darn incredible. And 40% said that they were doing worse than planned. Things that I want to point out about those numbers, there's some nuances, which we don't have up here. But basically what we found is that people who were doing better than planned, for the most part, were doing much better than planned. In other words, 5 to 20% better than planned. Most people who were doing worse than planned were about 1 to 5% down, not 5 to 20. So even as we looked at it, it was, you know, you really felt there was this rising tide here. As we kind of talk about, you know, who's really doing well, Lawncare is doing exceptionally well, specifically residential lawn care, but lawn care as a whole, 62% of those folks that reported reported that they were really having a fantastic year. Landscape, 53%. And what that's buoyed by is kind of our next point, which is residential versus commercial. The residential folks, we have one of my board members, Frank Mariani, up in Chicago, is having one of his best years ever. He's high-end residential. People are more focused on their homes. Our incoming president, Shane Newman, based in Connecticut, the Manhattanites have all fled to their homes in Connecticut, and now they're staying there. And as a result, he's busier than ever. So we do see this residential versus commercial. Clearly, if you were in the commercial business and you represented hotels, restaurants, retail outlets, things along that line that were your customers, you've struggled a little bit.
So Brit, the main difference between Lawncare and landscape is the Lawncare is more the residential landscape provider versus the landscape maintenance provider more commercial.
Yes, that's a significant difference. And so again, you do see as we talk about the percentage of lawn care companies that respond, for the most part, they are residential based. Not as many, and it takes a very unique type of corporate or commercial campus to want an enormous amount of lawn care and turf.
Right.
They exist certainly, but on the whole, we've seen the residential really have that lift in lawn care, and you just talk to members who are having record years, and it is absolutely incredible. So in any event, I think the other thing we wanted to touch on is also the job situation. I mentioned it to you earlier. We had sincere hope. One of the things that we done even in April was we conducted a national radio tour, and really going out there pitching our industry to all those folks that had were out of work. We have jobs, we have very good paying jobs, and we'd still love for you to come. You can see here on this slide, this data was taken in July, and we were still struggling, finding folks to do the work. Obviously the frontline work was tough, but even managerial roles, significantly challenging in terms of getting those positions filled. So one of the things that Andrew does for us beyond just his lobbying efforts is he also oversees our workforce. And he's going to speak a little bit about some of the things we're doing there as he kind of weaves through his presentation. But we continue to recognize that workforce is an enormous issue for our industry, and we've got to find better ways of addressing it. So know that we're focused in on that, and we're going to be looking to deliver more programs to help encourage people to examine our industry as a great career. So, and I would say for the overall outlook, despite some of the tremendous success, I think people are still very cautious about COVID, very cautious about the impact of a second wave. And the idea of remaining essential is critically important. So as much as we like to celebrate the victory, we have to now maintain it by making sure that no one gets jumpy and for some reason pulls our industry back. But the nature of how we work and the nature of what we do really allows us to say, look, guys, we're outside. That's what we're doing. So, as I mentioned on the workforce, we're really going to be gathering a lot more information. We have a lot of great resources we've developed. We're going to be working on packaging them and making them available so that lawn care and landscape folks can really utilize some of this great information and resources that we have. So if you're interested in that, please reach out and contact us afterwards. We're happy to let you know kind of the laundry list of things we have. So as I mentioned,
I've got a couple of questions I wanted to ask, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
One, the cautious optimism, right? It's the end of the month again. We're going to turn in a positive number in sales at Jane, and I think everybody sees that they're like, what's going on, right? I mean, why are these numbers good? Do you think that it's kind of counter to what's happening in society, and that people really, this is part of the cautious optimism?
It is. I will say that, it also depends on your business too. So for our commercial folks on their enhancements and some of their builds, they've been able to maintain because they had a backlog prior to COVID hitting. But for the I will tell you on the residential side, though, there is no lack of projects. We have a company here in the DC area, Jeff Rossin with Rossin Landscape, and he's in the pool business. And I will tell you, he's going to be digging pools based on just contracts he has in now through 2022.
Yeah.
So that's the optimism. The caution really comes in the fact of, is it sustainable if the economy doesn't restart? In other words, a lot of the white collar workers that are really helping this residential surge, what happens if we can't get the economy restarted quickly? And so certainly I'm optimistic that the economy will springboard back as soon as we get a vaccine. But that's a when and an if. And so I think until then, the interesting thing is that I do hear a lot of our members will be kind of sitting on cash for a little while. And so it will be interesting to see when they decide to kind of redo their fleets and make some of those big capital expenditures, because they are, not everyone, but for a large extent, cash flush at this point. So that'll be something that'll be really interesting to watch play out over the next 4 to 6 months, Richard.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for clearing that up for me. Thanks.
Sure. So again, as I look at this list, these are the things that we're focused in on at NALP while COVID still is in play. And so, all of these items, especially the first bullet point about remaining essential, is really a focal point, especially as we roll into what could be a new political regime, possibly. But with that, I will segue over to Andrew to kind of talk to you a little bit about what he's up to on the lobbying side. Andrew?
Great. Yep. Thank you, Brit. And thank you, Richard, for inviting Brit and myself. I get the privilege of giving an update on some government affairs stuff, and then I'm going to handicap the election or give an update. And I will give the disclaimer that you cannot hold any of this against me. I know this is being recorded, but just throw that out there. So first of all, Relentless advocacy is one of NALP's 5 pillars. And being the Vice President of Government Relations, I think it's the most important pillar. I'm obviously biased. But as we go into every year, we have a Government Affairs Council. We come up with a strategic plan, and we put issues into Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. I don't put Tier 3 in here because Tier 3 are issues we monitor that we should always be aware of, but we're probably not going to have a huge impact on. So think of like something like a massive issue like healthcare is Tier 3. It's clearly important to us. We clearly want to be able to educate and inform. And when there's times for us to get involved, it may move up to a Tier 2. But we're never going to be the alpha in that situation, as obviously the insurance and medical companies would be. So Tier 1 are those issues that we have to be leading on. And I kind of want to just list some of these because we're going to go over a few of them a little more in detail. And that's from a pesticide and fertilizer policy. That is, top line issue stuff for us because we are the national organization for the landscape industry. We're the only one that's going to represent those interests. H-2B reform is the other big ticket federal item. Namely, as we get into H-2B in a minute, of the program, the landscape industry represents about half of all H-2B visas issued every year. And next closest industry, which would be hotel and lodging, only makes up about 11 to 12%. So we are by far the biggest user of the program. It's extremely important to us. FIFRA education. FIFRA is the acronym for the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act, which is the federal statute that regulates pesticides. And we're always trying to educate people on how it actually does function. Preemption, sorry, I thought I froze for a second. Preemption is something that can happen in a state when a state would allow a locality to actually regulate the sale and use of pesticides. We don't want localities regulating the sale and use of pesticides. Trust me, Malibu is going to regulate pesticides much differently than other parts of California. I use California as an example, but every state will have examples like that. We want that being regulated at the state level. Water quality, obviously very important to many folks on this call, also extremely important to the landscape industry. We view ourselves as stewards of the environment, and we want healthy green spaces and never to be messing with water quality. And lastly, applicator certification and training. Anytime you're using a pesticide in the United States, you need to be a certified and trained applicator. There's recently been a lot of revisions to that, and we want to make sure we're always on the up and up, and that when these decisions are being made, people understand how our industry is actually applying these products. So with that's kind of how our tiers work. I won't dig into the tier 2 as much. Green building codes, I think you guys have seen stuff like USGBC and others. We want to make sure that these codes are never, making landscape or turf or other things we do seem like something that they would get a knock on when they're trying to get their lead score or some sort of green building code scores. Pollinators, they continue to be a huge issue, especially with the neonicotinoid review, which I'll delve into here in a moment. The Endangered Species Act, Pesticide Registration Information Act, that's what PREA, the acronym, is for. We also do track issues like contract issues and business issues that could really restrict the way that our members enter into contracts with homeowners. So there's been a push of that at the state level, not so much federal level. And blower bans and other sort of restrictions on the type of equipment we can use. This is kind of the big one percolating. There's something being proposed in California that may basically be moving the industry to entire electric, battery powered within the next 5 years. And as an industry, we don't necessarily oppose going there, but we don't think the infrastructure is there quite yet. And so we don't want to rush this along and have some really bad economic effects. So we're watching that closely, working closely with our partners over Outdoor Power Equipment Institute on that issue. So that's kind of the framework of what we're working on right now. But if Brit, if you can go to the next slide, I would just let you know that if anybody, if I was in a classroom right now or something like that, was there a huge omission from that list? And I'd say, yeah, there was a huge omission, because when we made that list, it was January 15th of 2020. Well, we had a little thing called COVID, which has turned our entire priorities upside down and impacted every fabric of all of our lives: personal, business, family, education. I have a 6-year-old upstairs doing online kindergarten. So we know that it's impacted everything that we do. And so, of course, from an industry, it really impacted us. Brit did a great job going over the fights at the state level for essential services. But I would like to give a brief rundown of some of the stuff that happened federally. Basically, we've had we've had 3 stimulus packages, and we're on the precipice of having a 4th. I think there's actually developments today on some of the things that may have occurred. But when these stimuluses were coming through, I think everybody is, I hope on this call, is aware of, they put in some emergency sick leave, so you could automatically get 2 weeks paid. And then you as the employer could get that taken off of your payroll taxes. Brit, did you just lose Richard too?
I did. Go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure. I'm hoping folks can still hear us because I've had some connectivity. But I'll just keep going, and then hopefully Richard will be back with us. If you guys do have a question, though, throw it in the chat, and I'll try to answer it as well. But I'll try to just keep moving through. So as I was saying, there was emergency sick leave, automatic 2 weeks. You could expand the Family Medical Leave Act. But the biggest one that I think everyone here is probably aware of is the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program. And then that allowed folks to move to keep employees on payroll and get federal loans that could be completely forgiven, or at least on extremely favorable terms. This has been a very successful program. It was rolled out really fast, though. So there was a lot of questions. There's a lot of confusion. There was even a point in mid-May that we were concerned that a lot of landscape companies that may have accessed the program would have to return the money or else immediately be liable for it. But luckily, we kind of got some more clarity. And I can tell you that as they're working on Stimulus 4, I feel pretty confident that when we do get a 4th stimulus package, which might not happen until after the elections, I do think there will be more PPP funds made available. And I think they're continuing to broaden what those funds can be used for. So not just payroll, but what about those expenses you had to use to retrofit your facilities to be, socially distancing, or materials you had to provide to keep employees safe? Those things are going to be eligible, I think, along with other things that could be useful. But we still have 2 big things we're working on in the next stimulus. And first is to limit the liability for anybody that could get sick from COVID while in the course of work. Now, we don't want anybody getting sick at work, so it's hopefully a non-issue, but the reality is that it could be. And we want to protect those in our industry from frivolous lawsuits. Now, it's very obvious that if somebody is wanton and totally grossly negligent and disregarding the fact that they know employee has COVID, well, that person should be liable. That employer should be liable. And that's not something that us as an industry would support. But we want to limit that and make sure there's clear white lines about what you can or can't do. And the Republican proposal in the Senate has that, but not sure how much progress is going to get in the House. And then lastly, we want to expand PPP loans to 501c6 organizations like NALP, We are lucky. We're a very strong organization, but budget constraints in COVID can hurt all of us. Canceling meetings or moving meetings to virtual can hurt all sort of trade associations. But really, some of our partners at the state level suffer to lose the most without some federal assistance. So that's kind of where we are with COVID at a federal. I don't know if Richard's coming back, so I'll just wait till the end for questions. So really want to keep moving us along. So H2B, I'll do a 1,000-foot overview of H2B. H2B is the guest worker program for non-agricultural seasonal labor. NALP, the landscape industry would be considered non-agricultural seasonal labor. This program allows an employer to bring a worker in from a foreign country for up to 10 months, and they must pay them a prevailing wage, which is based on the locality where they are located. They can't change those numbers. It's all through the Department of Labor wage department. And the issue with the H2B program is it's statutorily capped at 66,000. That's been the cap number since the program started back in the early 90s. There has been times where the cap has gone up based on what we have been told is a returning worker exemption. There's been other times we've been able to get the administration to release an additional 15, 20,000 visas, whatever that might be. But we had COVID and we were like, man, we're still going to have a problem. We know we're going to still have a problem. But here's the issue for us. We were fighting labor unions on the left and immigration hawks on the right to change the program, all under the guise that it's record unemployment. This doesn't hurt U.S. workers. This doesn't take away union jobs. That's what all of our opponents are saying. So when you get something like COVID happening and unemployment goes up, as you can see in that chart in April, we went from, I think we were down at one point below 3% to I think right in April, I think we touched upwards of 15%. So you 5 times increased it, and it became really hard for us to lobby to increase the cap. Actually, the opposite happened. The president had promised to release an additional 35,000 visas on April 1st. COVID happened. He is not releasing those. He then went a step further and actually suspended the program through December 31st of this year. We are optimistic that January 1, which is the really important date for our industry to apply to this program, that the program will be open again. We do know there are some exemptions even when the suspension is occurring. And we do know that there are several landscape companies that have been able to use these exemptions to our advantage. So we remain optimistic that we'll continue to operate, but we are still looking to fix this permanently. And that will be one of our biggest tasks as we bring in the new Congress, or the 117th Congress, and we figure out what sort of administration we're going to be dealing with, because this is the top federal legislative issue we will be dealing with and have been dealing with the next several years. All right, so I did want to also talk about some of the lawn care side and some of the pesticide stuff that we will continue to deal with. Basically, EPA, they're our regulator. There's a picture up there in the top right corner for those viewing this. We took EPA out on a field trip because they don't really sometimes understand exactly how we're using pesticides. And then there's the public that just thinks pesticides bad. I think everybody's aware of the Roundup lawsuits that are occurring throughout the country. NALP is actually engaged. Some of the NGOs sued the Environmental Protection Agency for registering glyphosate, and NALP and several other groups actually intervened to support EPA and the federal pesticide process. That is still pending. So are most of the ongoing litigations with the large amounts that you've seen. The Johnson v. Monsanto is the really large one with the hundreds of millions of dollar settlement. So what this has done is it puts us in a tough place where we're fighting, at the state, federal, and local level, these bans on these products. And we're trying to get out in front of that, whether it be the neonicotinoids, which have been accused of being very damaging to pollinators, which when used appropriately are not. I always tell people insecticides are meant to kill insects. That's how they're designed by nature. So it's really important when we use neonicotinoids, we use them carefully and with an abundance of caution, which is why NALP has created BMPs. But neonicotinoids still play a very valuable role in how we conduct, some of our lawn care and landscape services. The same is going to be said with both pyrethroids and glyphosate. Essentially, we are fighting an uphill battle with some of these pesticides. And if Brit, you can go to the next one, really illustrate some of it from more of a state level. Whereas at the federal level, we're dealing a lot with EPA. I am going to get to something, on the horizon. At the state level is where we get these bans left and right. Trust me, it's much easier to ban a pesticide in the state of Connecticut or the People's Republic of Maryland, as we jokingly, affectionately call it, versus it is the entire federal government. The federal government has some checks and balances that make it a little more difficult to get some extreme, legislation through. But we are really seeing some stuff that's going to be tough. Those states that I list right there are really tough states for some of the ways that we've responsibly used pesticides. And we're in an ongoing fight with Maryland right now, dealing with something happening in Baltimore County. Just had a call earlier this morning that is distressing. So these aren't going to go away. There will be maybe a silver lining to some good and some bad when I talk about the horizon stuff. But we're really in a tough spot with some of this. And I would just say anybody that's on this call, if you are in one of these states or you see your state there, I'll make sure that Richard has our contact information, because if you want to be engaged, I'd always want you to be plugged in with things we're doing and make sure you have your information. So Brit, if you want to go to the next, I want to make sure I get to some of the handicap in here and some of the on the horizon and give time for questions. So fights on the horizon. So H2B reform, that's kind of what I mentioned. And so I'm going to kind of do these fights on the horizon and give you like a little context of if we have an R or a D, and then we'll get into some of those things. So as I mentioned, H2B has opponents on the right and left. So the thought is you have a Trump administration. He just suspended the program. He wins re-election. Why would he not just continue to suspend the program and feed that red meat of his base that hates the program and thinks that these are illegal immigrants taking American jobs? That very well could happen. Part of me, the optimistic side, thinks that Trump is a shrewd businessman. After re-election, would realize he doesn't have to basically placate to that base and would cut deals that are good for the American economy. And the H2B reform is good for the American economy. It supports American jobs. If you have a Biden administration, what's it going to do to H2B? Well, that will be really important to watch who he puts at the Department of Labor and Department of Homeland Security, because those two agencies have jurisdiction over the program. Now, if the people that he puts in from the Department of Labor are union hawks, we're going to have some difficulties on the far left. If you put somebody in DHS that are hard immigration hawks, we could get stuck behind massive immigration reform and just have to fall on the sword. So in both instances, you have a worst case scenario. In both instances, you have a best case scenario. And we're kind of planning for both right now, as both campaigns are in the process of creating transition teams. They're being formed right now. We employ lobbyists that have inroads there. We're always kind of trying to figure that part out. But until after the election, we're not really going to be able to make that impact. But we're trying to plan for those scenarios. Another one would be this. I wrote the Udall-Neguse anti-pesticide bill. In August, a really offensive pesticide bill was introduced, way more offensive than anything I've seen since I've been doing this. And the fact that it even saw the light of day was troubling. It's not moving in this Congress, but the fact that it got introduced is a marker that we've got some work to do, some education to go out to Democrats and Republicans alike and make sure they understand why pesticides are so important. So as I say, H2B's been kind of our front runner from a federal legislative standpoint, and pesticides have been more on the administrative side a lot of times. They're both going to be neck and neck when we come into this next Congress. We're going to have bogeys on the left and right of the aisle, and bogeys on the left and right of kind of the stuff we do from a landscape and a lawn care perspective. Then we're kind of planning, what is EPA going to be? If EPA, if Biden wins, you would imagine that EPA is going to get more progressive. I think Governor Jay Inslee up in Washington is the front runner to be the next administrator of the EPA. The question is, how radically might he change the EPA? I hope you know that most of the people that are regulating pesticides in the Office of Pesticide Programs are career bureaucrats. They're not political appointees. They rely on the science, they rely on the process. And that's why we support EPA, even when we don't agree with their decisions. That being said, you never know with a new administration if they might make pesticides one of their top priorities. I generally think when a Democrat retains control of the EPA, they go after some bigger fish like oil and water and some of that stuff. But pesticides obviously could come under the microscope. State bans and local bans, they're going to be a big issue. When we go through the states in a second, you're going to see the states are going to have some problems. And we're always going to be worried about some anti-business legislation and regulation. President Trump has put a lot of stuff through the Department of Labor, such as rolling back some overtime stuff, some minimum wage stuff, some defining what an independent contractor is. Well, if we have a Trump administration, we can expect a lot of those to get rolled back, and that could have some serious consequences on your business. And then lastly, consumer perception. That's the number one thing. We are here to serve our consumers, our customers, but more importantly, environment. And it's disturbing when people think that we're harming the environment when we don't have a profession if we're not protecting the environment. It's also unfortunate sometimes people think that we may, we have a labor problem or we're employing illegal immigrants. Well, I can't speak for the whole industry, but I can speak on behalf of the industry for the National Association of Landscape Professionals, and that's not what we support. And we support, hiring legals or hiring people through the proper guest worker programs. So these are perception issues that we're always going to have an issue with, and they're not going to change overnight or from November 3rd or November 4th. And the more we continue to think about and strategize is the way we'll have the most impact. So with that, I'll move to some, once again, disclaimer. I'm not saying I'm right, but I just give you a couple data points. So I would assume people would be laughing if I could hear you all, but there was an event last night, if you didn't hear about it. I'm calling it an event because I'm not sure if you could technically call it a debate. I have no horse in the race. I'm not picking sides. I'm just going to say I think it was disappointing and more of an event than a debate. That being said, I thought a really interesting takeaway before we look at some of the polling numbers right now is President Trump has a very solid 30% of the electorate that I would say is a ride or die sort of supporter. They're with him no matter what. And guess what last night? His support, that 30% did not move, okay? They're not gonna move, they loved it. His problem is Biden has about 35, maybe even almost 40 that are pre-locked in. So they're fighting over that next 20 to 30. And I think what happened last night by the initial polling is Trump didn't appeal to anybody outside of that 30. And he's having a hard time winning election without it. So take that for what it is. I think debates, as you will look at historically, don't really serve to move numbers. At this point, I think numbers are kind of baked. This is all about getting out the vote. As somebody that's worked on presidential campaigns, at this point in the stage, you're not trying to convince voters, you're trying to turn voters out. And I do think that's why the Supreme Court was such a really interesting moment. I think it was actually a mini pre-October surprise, because I think it took the shift away from COVID and into something that I think could really help Trump. I think that's why last night's debate performance, I think, will be heavily questioned inside of the Republican Party from taking away some of that momentum and shifting, back to COVID and some of the things he doesn't want to spend as much time talking about. So here is the Electoral College as it stands from the Cook Political Report. I always use Cook. There's other sites out there. I'm not saying Cook's the best. It's just the one that I've used for a long time. Charlie Cook's well established in Washington, D.C. circles. So you look at this, you just need to get 270 to win. If you look at the map right now, Biden has 275 and it's without Texas. And this is with Texas, not even declared. So let's just talk hypothetically here and you look at these states, all right? I'm giving Texas back to the Republicans. I'll go ahead and give Georgia back to the Republicans. But that's about it, okay? So if you look at that, if Trump cannot take those states and flip Florida and also take Ohio, which, mind you, no Republican has won the presidential election since, I believe, Dwight D. Eisenhower without Ohio. He's got to flip Ohio and Florida, get Texas, and then basically run the table, okay? Because you take Florida out of this map right here and you move it back over into the red column, do the math. If you see the polling in Michigan and Minnesota and Arizona, so that's 16-10, my math is terrible, so that has us up to 37. 37 is more than 29. So even if you lose Florida and it goes back to the Republicans or Trump in this matter, I think the Democrats are in such a strong position to win Ohio, Michigan, Michigan, Minnesota, and Arizona. It doesn't matter. The election is still 30 days away, so it can change. But the president is in a very precarious position at this point and almost can't afford to. If he wins every one of those brown states according to this map, he's not the president, because 275 already has Biden there. He's got to win every single one of those brown and pick off that Florida or pick off that PA or pick off that Wisconsin. And if you look at the way the president is spending his money right now, the money is concentrated in Florida, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. That's where he's spending his money. That's, I think, his only path forward at this point. He's assuming he's got Ohio, so he's not spending money there. He's assuming he's got Texas, he's not spending money there. So, like I said, we've got some ways to go, but right now it's looking better for Vice President Biden. And like I said, I'm not pulling for one or the other. I'm just kind of giving you kind of what the numbers are saying. So then that comes into play is the Senate. So right now, the Senate, because of independence and the way it caucuses, you basically have, a 48 to 52 Senate. but there are more Republicans up for election. So all you need in the Senate is you need to have 51, or you need to have 50 and have the White House as the tiebreaker. So you look at this map. Let's take a look again right here. We're using the same sort of metrics that from the Cook Political Report. The Democrats are in a position to be comfortably at 48, okay? And the Republicans comfortably at 47, and then we have this 5. So let's just look at these 5 and see this relationship to the presidential election. Montana, outlier. I think Montana probably will still go for President Trump, but because of kind of some of the dynamics up there and the senators up for election, Montana could easily flip. So, you know, there's one, but I'm not saying that. Iowa, Joni Ernst, she was the darling of the party 6 years ago when she came in. I don't think she's done anything to jeopardize her position in the party. I think what she's fallen victim to is a trending electorate in Iowa that is trending blue. And Iowa's actually in play in the presidential, not as much. I tend to think that Iowa will come home to roost and stay red. So then you come down to North Carolina, Georgia, and Maine. And this is where I think the presidential comes into play. I think the state that I'll be watching the closest on election day, and not just the state, it'll be the suburbs around Charlotte and some of the bigger cities in North Carolina. And I want to see how they're performing from a Democratic versus our metric. Because if the Senate and the president, if Senator Tom Tillis is the senator up for election, if he loses North Carolina, it's going to be because of the suburban vote. And if Senator Tom Tillis loses North Carolina, then I believe that President Trump will also lose the vote because they've tied each other to the hip. So from election night, watch those North Carolina races. I think they'll be really telling, and you'll know early because I believe North Carolina's a 7 o'clock closing, and usually you get some of those suburb exit polls pretty quickly. So I think there's a very good possibility that President Trump pulls down the Republican ticket and leads away to Democrats to regain the Senate. That said, I could see it going either way. I don't think the Democrats will have some massive mandate in the Senate. The dynamics are too difficult for even a senator like Senator Susan Collins up in Maine, who's come under a lot of fire, but just has a track record of being kind of moderate. So you got to wonder if that's going to carry the day for her. And incumbents always have an advantage, and never forget that. So briefly, with the last 2 minutes, House, I had to put this in here. The House is not really in play. I say this right now because, Richard, when the House flips Republican, please make sure you have me saying the House isn't in play, because Brit will love throwing that in my face.
Headlines on the blog.
But no, I just think the dynamics are too tough for the Republicans to pick up the necessary House seats to get there. They're defending in too many they're on the defense more than the offense. I think there's actually a possibility they lose some of their seats, but we'll have to wait and see. So I'm not going to spend much time there, but thought I'd at least show you that map because I have one more map I wanted to show you. What we always talk about in state politics is the trifecta. You have the governor, you have the upper and lower chamber, the House or Senate at the state level. These are your trifectas in the country, okay? In some of these states that are gray, okay, and this is why I bring this up, there is serious possibility of trifectas coming in the blue territory. Competitive states to go into that trifecta territory include Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, North Carolina, New Hampshire, Maine, Georgia, Florida. See any similarities? Those are also battleground states for the presidency. I say this because how the president goes is the way I think government is about to go for the next 2 to 4 years. And I think how he performs at the top ticket is going to impact everything down. And this has extreme consequences for the landscape industry. And I'll be very candid with you, some good, some bad. And we're going to adapt to those. We're going to have to pivot depending on what happens. As an industry, we work with members on both sides of the aisle with all different beliefs. And that's not going to change. So this isn't a fear-mongering thing. This is a wake up. I hope everybody here, is making sure they're voting on behalf of their own beliefs. But we also want you to be engaged in the process. So that's what we asked for. That's what we're spending our time on. I saved about 10 minutes, and people can question how wrong I am with some of these projections. So thanks, Richard.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you for that recap, and I know a lot of my marketing team was nervous when I said we're going to get into some election stuff and politics, and they were like, oh boy, I don't know if we want to go there, but I think you handled it really well, and I appreciate that. Nice job. So yeah, and we're getting a few comments in right now as far as great recap and thank you. So if there is a change in the administration, what are a couple of the one or two top things that you think we as an industry should be watching for?
Sure. So the first things we're going to want to know is who they're going to put in these cabinet positions. So the three positions that we as an industry will watch the closest, I already mentioned the EPA administrator, but we'll also look for the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Labor. Department of Labor covers a lot of what we do, but it's also involved in H-2B, and Department of Homeland Security is heavily involved in H-2B. I think when we look at this election, the question is going to be, if President Trump wins re-election, he hasn't really shown us what he wants to do for the next 4 years. So we can kind of just put our hands up and say, what's he going to make? Is it going to be immigration? Is it going to be something with trade? I don't know. What we do know is that it seems like President Biden has indicated about 4 or 5 things that I think would be at the top of things he wants to do. And I think some of that is going to be climate, some of that's going to be healthcare. And I do think immigration is going to fall somewhere in that top 5. I think what's important about immigration is if immigration reform really happens, and this has been being talked about for the last 25 years. So I say this kind of exasperated, that I don't want to hold my breath on that. But immigration reform would be really good for the country and for the landscape industry, and it would be an opportunity to fix the H-2B program permanently. So that's what we're going to be watching very closely.
Yeah. And Andrew, is somebody
just to add to that, Richard, one of the things that what Andrew even talked about there is the order of which the administration prioritizes things, because it sometimes being in the top 5 really doesn't get you there. In many instances, if you're in the top 2, certainly you're more optimistic that someone's going to take care of that. I also think the dynamic will be very different if the president succeeds in holding on and getting a second term, and the Senate shifts to blue. And then we've got a House and a Senate that are both Democratic. So it will be certainly interesting times to see how this all pans out.
Yeah. And then I just have one last question for today. You know, as somebody who's devoted a good portion of their life to water conservation, I'm always disappointed every election that water conservation doesn't become a bigger point. And what do you think it's going to take in the future to really bring water conservation to the forefront of the discussions?
Well, I think water conservation, well, let me backtrack. I think water has been a pretty hot topic, spanning from the end of the Obama administration all through the Trump administration, through the Waters of the U.S. Rule, and then the litigation, and then the rollback of rules from the Trump administration. So I would tell you that I believe if we have a Biden presidency, we're going to get a rollback of the rule, if that makes sense, if you're tracking how everything went. And in that greater conversation of waters of the United States, I do think there's a conversation to be had more about the conservation. And I think that that's where us as an industry need to do a better job of making ourselves heard. I know I work closely with the Irrigation Association and John Farner on some of the water sense stuff that he's been working on. And we plan to play a more hopefully influential role there. But we were always open to suggestions and constructive criticism on ways we can do that. But I do think that there's an opportunity, especially with some of the climate stuff that I think could be coming out with a grand Green New Deal, which Vice President Biden explained last night would be a priority, but slightly different than the Green Deal that's been out there. But I think it's going to be at the forefront, and then we'll hopefully be able to engage.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, listen, Brit, any final thoughts or in closing here for today?
Well, yeah, no, again, I think we appreciate the opportunity to get in front of this audience. And, I certainly hope you guys found this valuable. And please do put lots of money down on all of Andrew's projections, because very consistent. No, but please know that NALP is a resource for you all. And please don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. Our job is to serve this industry and really help it get where it needs to be as a whole. So please utilize us. I just was speaking to our new president, Shane Newman, yesterday. And one of the things that he's going to probably trumpet during his year in office here is getting people to use more of the resources that are available. We have a lot available. And if we don't have it, we generally work pretty hard to try and get it for you. So just know that we're here as a resource, and we want to help. And anything we can do to make your lives easier or better, please please let us know. But also thank you for all you guys do. Richard, we really appreciate Jane allowing us to come on and be a part of this, and you all becoming, being members of NALP is very important to us as well. So please know how much we appreciate that and appreciate you and this opportunity.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Now you guys have a virtual conference coming up, right? Which is something new and different.
We do. We have just a real quick plug for you, but we have our virtual landscapes coming up. Obviously due to COVID, we had to make this switch. Real quick, this is kind of what it's all about. And I will say, for people who've not attended a virtual conference, they are different. And so, you really kind of pick and choose, but it also gives you the freedom and flexibility to really participate in a bunch of things. One of the keys we learned, Richard, was that when we conduct the conference, if you register for it, you'll have access to the sessions for the next 365 days.
Wow.
So, again, if you didn't take a note at a particular time or you missed a session because it was conflicting with the one, we want you to be able to access everything that happens. We're going to be doing some cool interactive stuff. Actually, one of our social events, we're partnering with Sierra Nevada Brewery, and you'll be getting a behind-the-scenes tour of Sierra Nevada. And so we're trying to do some cool and different stuff and make it fun. And just kind of the last thing to show the audience is that we tried to deliberately kind of stage things beginning in the afternoon on the East Coast so that our West Coast folks could participate. It certainly makes for a slightly earlier day for the West Coasters, but we wanted to make sure that there was available timing for everybody. So you can see the 3 days where things will take place. And we have something called Breakfast with Champions. Anyone who's ever been to our event knows that that's generally a favorite of folks. And we're converting that to Zoom with Champions. So those types of things will still be there. It will be different. We acknowledge that, but we think you'll enjoy it, and we're excited about it.
Yeah, that's great. What a great conference laid out here. I love this schedule. I recognize many of the speakers, really great speakers that you're going to have on there. And, this is one of those occasions where different can be, and many times, as good, if not better, depending on your own personal ability to travel or whatever. So this will be very interesting. Good luck with this. And I think it's going to be a big success. Thank you guys for doing it.
Well, we appreciate that, and we are looking forward to it. And you're right, we do consider this an opportunity for people who couldn't make the trip. Maybe in past years, this is a great way to check it out. So anyway, thank you again, and we're excited about it and looking forward to it, and looking forward to getting to 2021, and hopefully it will bring some normalcy back for everyone in the United States, and that our industry will continue to grow as it has, because we're really excited about that and all the things that growth will mean for this industry as it continues to grow and progress.
Yeah. Okay, great. So Brit, Andrew, thank you again to all our visitors out there. I want to thank you again for giving us an hour of your time, your valuable lunch time. We really appreciate that. We hope we've delivered the kind of content you're looking for. Feel free to email me if we're missing the boat, or if there's something you want to learn more about, a different subject or somebody else to have on. In our thank you email this afternoon, I'll put both Brit and Andrew's contact information. So if there's something else you want to discuss with them, you can go ahead and reach out to them. So again, Brit, Andrew, thanks very much. Listeners, thank you. And we'll see you guys in a future Lunch and Learn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.